So it's my great pleasure to introduce the second keynote of our conference. And at my first visit to the International Congress of Qualitative Inquiry at Champaign, Illinois, in my first ever presentation of our sport research, I presented alongside Claudio Moreira and marveled at the story he told about life in Brazil, around football, of how poverty and injustice and fear shape a body. And I can still remember, I think a good story sticks with you, and it stayed all these years later. And I was hooked on his scholarship from that moment. And the following year, as I ran to give him a big hug, I realised halfway through the embrace that I was actually hugging his soul brother, Marcelo Diversi, whom I had never met. And graciously, when Marcelo released me from his embrace and unlocked his arms, he laughed and he said he just expect all English people would hug like that. But over the years, nearly a quarter of a century, the conference ran, we hugged each other nearly every year. Through these times, I knew who I was hugging, and both Marcelo and Claudio were not just colleagues, but respected and good-loved friends and companions on the journey we share. Claudio travelling with his partner and children when they were young, and we carved a special place at the conference outside the main building where we would share music and sing together. And there's something very, very special that unites people when they share music together. Marcelo and I also had a baby together. A baby Taylor guitar, that is. And at the moment I have custody of the guitar. And I live waiting for us to play music again and for our baby to be united with you, Marcelo. Marcelo, for those of you that don't know, has been a faculty member in the Department of Human Development at Washington State University since August 2006. His scholarship focused on examining and deconstructive narratives of us versus them that have historically been used to exclude and dominate the other. His work provides a wonderful example of how to trouble colonialist ideologies and knowledge production about the other, while also interrogating dominant narratives of deviance and free will. Notably, his craft embraces the possibility for advancing ethnographic narratives that highlight the encounter between researchers and collaborator, and the narratives that invite the reader to see themselves, even if fleetingly, in the other person's lives. He writes, the central goal of my scholarship is to expose the social structures and mechanisms that officially justify exclusionary ideologies, policies, practices, while also sharing ideas of how to move towards a more inclusive and kind world. For Claudio, he writes that his work is right at the intersection of race and gender and class. And his performance, autoethnographies, look at words, knowledge, concepts and actions which expose differences and also shape and mark bodies. A quarter of a century after starting this work, he writes, I'm still obsessed with knowledge production and how bodies are excluded in academic spaces and writing. Their work can be found in journals like the International Review of Qualitative Research, in Performance Quarterly, International Journals of Qualitative Studies, Critical Studies, Cultural Studies, Critical Methodologies. And they have two co-authored books together, Between a Talk, which I would encourage all of you to read if you haven't read it already. David and I came back from the Congress of Qualitative Inquiry with a copy, and David had read it by the time he got off the flight when we arrived in England. It's a wonderful book. And their second book, Between Autoethnographies, A Path Towards Social Justice, came out in 2018 with Routledge. Both Claudio and Marcelo, I believe, met at the University of Illinois, where they studied and conducted their doctorates under the mentoring of Norman Denzin. I have often felt jealous of such type of input but I can imagine that he was a really hard, exacting taskmaster, always pushing you to further look at getting the tent bigger and to evoke social justice in your work. So it gives me the most amazing pleasure and thank you for being our keynote speakers today. Can I invite you to welcome Claudio and Marcelo into the conference?
Thank you so much, everybody. Kitrina, can you just do a sound check with us? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
How about me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Check.
Most
Okay.
excellent. Thank you for your very, very beautiful and gracious introduction. And I look forward to checking in on our baby Taylor together sometime soon. I was supposed to be there with you all in person this time. It broke my heart a little bit that I couldn't make it, but I'm very glad to have this opportunity to do it from far away. So Claudio will get us started, and normally we have a much more dynamic type of presentation for our own sake, but because of Zoom land and our awkwardness with it, we'll do a little more of a traditional presentation with some chunks, but we want you to know that we don't even remember, who wrote what letter, what word, what sentence, of what we are presenting, because we have been working together for so long, and after all these years and decades, we feel like, we speak together in so many ways. We actually have known each other since we were about 18 years old, in Brazil.
16.
Yeah, so I can't remember that far back.
Go back and check.
So it was way before we actually also worked together, which was not a coincidence, at the University of Illinois. Some of it will appear in our presentation today.
Então, irmão, posso começar? Should we start?
Sim, começa, amiga.
Tá bom. Bem-vindo. Welcome. This is a multi-layered and intentionally messy text. Our lives, as much as yours, are messy. Our lives don't have an introduction, a development, and a conclusion. Lives don't fit neatly on a page. Lives are not organized enough to follow the traditional rules of linear academic writing. So, we invite and hope that you will be with us in this short journey, where the beginning may be in the final page, where glimpses are not always sequential or don't seem clean at first. Our lives and writing are convoluted, a set of interpretative narratives, back and forth in our own histories and stories. Even when not in a linear way, our autoethnographies are always moving back and forth from the personal to the political, from personal trouble to public issues, from our biographies to history in the making, back and forth, sometimes dancing, sometimes struggling to find our footing, but always leaning on each other, our long friendship, our shared Freudian pedagogy of hope. In our autoethnographic explorations, we try to offer our own understanding of what autoethnography is for us, how we rely on memories and reflections to reinvent, reinterpret, and recreate history, always looking for more inclusive possibilities for social justice. We will describe our thoughts on autoethnography in general, and between autoethnographies in particular, later in this talk. For now, we want to start by saying a few words about where we want to arrive at the end of our journey in this life with, through, by embracing autoethnography as a way of knowing, living, being, and fighting for unconditional inclusion and kindness. We try our best to feel, think, write autoethnographies that create possibilities of imagining a utopian future with more dignity and respect for more people. In the spirit of resistance against ideologies of domination, we try to create representational double mirrors of our own encounters with injustice. Situated, subjective, and hopeful.
We both have been inspired by Paulo Freire and his pedagogy of hope. We have been teaching, writing, and collaborating, believing that hope is an ontological need. Perhaps even more so now that many democracies are experiencing a return to populist nationalism, full of intense and overt exclusionary narratives and unfriendly walls, founded on ideologies and narratives that intensify notions of us against them, along ethnic, gender, class, sexual orientation, abilities, disabilities, religious, and immigration status. We keep asking, how do we get from us versus them to us and them? Is that possible? If so, how? If not, how close can we get to it? These questions are more urgent, more pressing than ever. Our survival depends on our ability to expand the notion of us, the circle of us, the spaces between us and them need to be filled with more compassion over hatred, with cooperation over non-zero-sum propositions, with stories where we resonate with their humanity, and vice versa. We have a long and hard road ahead. Alone, despair seems inevitable, even paralyzing. Together, we might be able to keep our bearings towards social justice. In times of increasing us versus themism, in times of greater exclusionary politics, in times where hope for social justice seems to have lost its way for so many of us. These questions and themes are central to our work and the aspects of autoethnography that we would like to explore here. As James Baldwin reminds us, we've got to be as clear-headed about human beings as possible because we are still each other's only hope. Inspired by Gloria Zaldúa, we call ourselves betweeners, conscious and unconscious bodies experiencing life in and between two cultures. Betweener autoethnographies for us is about how we, two third world scholars who work in first world universities, believe the post-colonial decolonizing discourse can enhance the concepts of inclusive social justice through a form of autoethnography that keeps asking readers to seek our shared humanity in our shared experiences of being caught on the side of them, even when we feel that we are part of us. We all share experiences of exclusion, feelings of sadness, anxiety, and fear of not belonging to a meaningful collective, of being on the wrong side of the tracks, even when mostly living in a life of privilege. We try to write autoethnographies that explore the in-between spaces we inhabit as an invitation for others to find theirs and for us to connect. We write performative texts that have developed out of our personal experiences in the places we live and labor, and our embodiment of theories and narratives of conscientization in academic spaces, but also in everyday lives. We think of betweener autoethnographies as academic and pedagogical performances that come from our histories, our displacements, our chosen yet not full and chosen diasporas. We write from our mutt, half-breed bodies in an attempt to disrupt and challenge the intense us versus them paradigm created by colonization and its ideological foundation. An ideology of domination with clear winners over losers, takers over givers, colonizer over colonized, men over women, binary over gender and sexual fluidity, prophet over people, European settler over everyone else, detached standpoints over personal storytelling. Betweener autoethnographies are the result of our lives, our encounter with each other, our questions and dialogues about the role of public intellectuals, as our own roles, in relation to systems of oppression that continue to marginalize humans in poverty and deprivation in lesser categories of them. Betweener autoethnographies are the performance texts we use to critique the disembodied ways in which oppression continues to be constructed as necessary to the maintenance of order and the status quo, as punishment for those with the wrong hair, skin color, sexual desire, and those with dream of unconditional inclusion and love. We seek to learn from and to write autoethnographies that focus on the lived experiences happening in the spaces between us and them, between fixed identity categories, between linear narratives of being and the messiness and juxtapositions of being human, between being the good guys and being the bad guys, between having stamps of approval and not having such stamps, no matter how hard one tries. We seek autoethnographies that have a laser focus on how ideologies of domination always attempt to justify exclusionary narratives, policies, and praxis. To us, between our autoethnographies have a direct and clear intent to write ourselves into history as a way of creating counter-hegemonic possibilities of a more just world for more people. And so, again, we keep asking, how do we find our commonalities in our daily lives? We can only experience life through our bodies, and all bodies exist in the intersection of race, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, religion, histories, geographies, and the basic human emotions like fear, anger, sadness, joy. And so we keep returning to our bodies, to our common hopes, to our intersections, to our in-between localities. Why, one may ask, are we obsessed with decreasing the distance between us and them? Well, because it's harder to hurt one of us. Because, as we tell our students, if we don't change our performances, we're going to kill each other and the planet, even without meaning to do so. Because, as James Baldwin kindly reminds us, we are each other's only hope.
At a national conference, the performer enters the stage to present her ethnographic work with Asian women. The professor speaks in an accented voice. And yes, the professor is white and US American, a native English speaker, pretending to be a Vietnamese woman. A burst of bile erupts in my stomach. Here we go again. I want to leave the room. I want to run. Every time we speak a word in English, the accent is our companion. Our accented tongues can't make a word without it. Our accented tongues marking us as foreigners and seldom in a kind way. Not from here, not good enough for teaching as we are told in grad school, marked criminals, illegals, or simply not good enough. The question about the performer choosing to impersonate an accented other to improve the show is a question for another time. What we can tell you is that that's not helpful to break the fourth wall with these audience members. Quite the opposite. It created an extra wall, similar to the one the US president wants to build on the US-Mexican border. In that moment, we are marked. The other, the foreigner, one of them. It is not a good time to be an alien in the land of the free. Why not mark our commonalities instead of our difference? Why did that white woman feel like speaking the autoethnographic stories her participants shared in a fake accent instead of speaking in her own language and from her own white body? Who can speak for whom? Under what circumstance? Isn't the fake accent like a soft version of blackface theater? Or brownface? Or colored accents? Why mark the difference in cultures and representational power through an impersonation of a participant's accent speaking English for the benefit of the US American researcher especially when trying to show methodological sympathy and connection with a woman from Vietnam? Why not mark our commonalities instead of perpetuating the myth of a romanticized notion of cultural purity? Drop the fake accent and attempt to be a stand-in for the other. Inclusive ethical autoethnography needs to avoid the benign white liberal impulse to give voice to the other. This fake accent performance reminds us of third world feminists' resistance against uncritical white feminist representation of those under additional oppression, what Kimberly Crenshaw coined as intersectionality. As Rosa Villafane Sisolak wrote decades ago, quote, I'm from an island whose history is steeped in the abuse of white imperialism, whose people still suffer the deformities caused by Euro-American colonialism, old and new. Unlike many third world liberationists, however, I cannot claim to be a descendant of any particular strain, noble or ignoble. I am, however, purely bred, descendant of all parts involved in that cataclysmic epoch. I despair, for the various parts of me cry out for the retribution at have been brutally uprooted and transplanted to fulfill the prophet cry of white righteousness dominance. My soul mourns the part of me that was destroyed by the callous instrument, the gun, the whip, the book. My mind echoes with the screams of disruption, desecration, destruction. End of quote. Our betweener autoethnographers attempt to highlight our common hybrid humanity, our common human need for air, water, and food, our common hybrid human need to speak in our own voices, tongues, and accents.
Should we really embrace the persistent tribal idea to only take care of our own? The escalation of us versus themism is happening in many places. It is in Brazil, where we grew up, in the US, where we live and labor, in our South American neighbors, in Europe, Asia, and beyond. Xenophobia seems to be everywhere. The rise of the global right, founded on notions of purity of race, culture, religion, and traditional gender binaries, is unmistakable in the political success of parties with anti-immigration crusades. For us, who experienced life between Brazil and the USA, it broke our hearts to hear homophobic chants recorded in the São Paulo, Brazil subway to celebrate the election of Jair Bolsonaro as president, a politician who, when speaking of a black settlement founded by Afro-Brazilians, stated, quote, they do nothing. They're not even good for procreation, end quote. We both have heard the words, quote, criminal aliens being spoken by the United States president many times. Each time we cringe at how that makes us, so many of us feel bad, attacked, defensive, and othered. We cringe at how carefully the US president enunciates such words of exclusion, marginalization, and demonization of new immigrants. Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? Trump has said. The Brazilian former president, Jair Bolsonaro, said that he, quote, would be incapable of loving a homosexual son. He says, I would prefer my son to die in an accident than show up with a mustachioed man, end quote. Trump again. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Trump wrote on Twitter, attacking Democratic representatives, all American citizens, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, and Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, all women of color. Here's Bolsonaro again, in a radio interview a few years ago, quote, "The dictatorship's mistake was to torture, but not to kill," end quote. This xenophobia and ideology of exclusion is directly connected to a larger global trend of record-breaking numbers of people being displaced and forced into a refugee existence. According to the United Nations High Commission of Refugees, in their annual Global Trends report from 2025, nearly 120 million people are currently displaced across the planet. Yet, the dominant narrative linking civil war refugees with terrorist organizations, with fear-mongering stories of the other, persists.
The beginning. We, Marcelo and Claudio, become friends in our teen years. We both share the same nationality. We both grew up under dictatorship. We both never imagined that we would one day be professors in US American universities. However, we experience life on the opposite sides of the social class spectrum. Yes, we share the core of our onto-epistemological endeavors through autoethnography, but the significant difference of our authorial situatedness led us to distinguish epistemological and methodological positions, entrance points, especially at the beginning of our academic careers. We joke with each other that Claudio comes from the streets and Marcelo from the library. If you wish to be together, we had to learn to respect, to be compassionate with each other, to find our middle ground, and cross the borders of social class. In order to nurture and cultivate our friendship, we had to become border smugglers. We should not have been friends, and yet, against all odds, a maddening love has kept us together. If you ask Claudio, he would tell you Marcelo saved his life. Okay, the rich helping the poor. Yeah. If you ask Marcelo, his answer would be the same. Claudio saved his life. Both love, honor, and respect each other in their difference. We found our in-between spaces. We are betweeners, border smugglers from an early age. We stuck with each other even when life took us in different paths. Two teenagers trying to find their way in an unjust world, trying to improve their lot, belonging to greater cause, have meaningful lives, trying to find each other's humanity. We didn't know how to name it back then. We both honored and trust our visceral knowledge. We both feed in music and poetry, especially in music and poetry from a time that every American nation below the equator was under dictatorship. When two young people were learning how to live and yearn for utopian reality full of hope and love. We both, from our different social classes, were able to make sense of our lives and found each other in friendship, in solidarity. Early in love, blurred in theory, we found common meaning in our betweener identities, always living and performing from the borders we have crossed together. As you wrote elsewhere, What we have been calling betweener autoethnography comes from a long tradition of self-reflexive writing that explores personal experience and how this experience connect autobiography to history, how personal experience connect with wider cultural, political, and social understandings. Performing autoethnography for us forces the writer, researcher to place her, his, their body into history, making it impossible for any of us to escape the crisis of representations and ideologies of domination we inhabit. It attempts to make the illusion of neutrality to be just that, an illusion. We are always inspired by the border smugglers who came before.
In 1964, Brazil, during the beginning of the military coup, only people who were able to write and read could vote. Can you see the danger in Paulo Freire's teaching the oppressed how to read and write the world? Literacy itself was often denied from the oppressed. What are the possibilities of the personal narrative, of this theorizing of the body, the writer and researcher's body, as a form of empowerment to denounce and critique oppressive systems against those enslaved and otherwise conquered, colonized, and historically dehumanized? Border smugglers like Paulo Freire, who was raised with privilege in masculinity and ethnicity, yet crossed the border of social class in order to promote conscientization among the oppressed. Show us ways to resist and dismantle oppressive system. In many ways, we're all border smugglers in our own lives, but we have much to learn and relearn from those who face deadly borders of oppression with courage and unreasonable hope. We believe that, for example, Frederick Douglass, through his three autobiographical narratives, as a person who escaped slavery to become a leader of the abolition movement in the United States in the middle 1800s, was an earlier autoethnographer before the name of autoethnography was created. He used his personal narrative to change history, to critique, trouble, resist, and challenge systems of oppression, while also making a call to liberation, freedom, emancipation, and ultimately reconciliation and social healing. Again, as James Baldwin warned us, we are each other's only hope. As two people who should not have been friends and yet who madly love each other, we continue striving for narratives that unites us, all of us. And there are plenty of such narratives in our history as humans. Saving one life at a time, even if it's our own at first, 1 millimeter at a time, one student at a time, looking for places that let us hope. It may be our classrooms and other educational settings, where differences can be examined as part of a much greater force, our similarities, our common humanity. Power is always being created and recreated, but only together do we find power against oppression and exclusion and demonization. We live in different bodies in history, of course, but we must move together towards a shared goal of inclusionary narratives of social justice. What kind of knowledge reality will bring us to this type of utopian project? We don't know. We haven't been there yet. As Stuart Hall reminds us, it's a project without guarantees. But we know that finding our human commonalities in the in-between lived experiences is our only hope. Only together, all of us together, do we have a chance to keep on marching towards this utopia in a circle of us so inclusive that there will be no more them. We teach thousands of students, we attend conferences, we write books and papers, we write letters of recommendation, we support our students and our colleagues. We have a unique opportunity to live a praxis of conscientization. Marcelo and Claudio cannot use Freire's concepts to only make a manuscript look nice or smart. We both believe in education, in our roles as public intellectuals, as teachers, citizens of this place we call Earth. We dare to hope, especially in times of despair, in times when we find ourselves between hell and narrative. We dare to hope. That is our mission, our job, every time we stand to teach a class. And so we keep insisting on learning, doing, living, teaching, writing, performing narratives of inclusion, inspired by our muse, Norman K. Denson. We resist because we must. There are no other options. The end.
Thank you so much. There's a wonderful sense of support, joy, communion with you both. And at this point, I would like to open the floor on both for my online colleagues as well as everyone in the room. If you have some reflections, some sensations in your body, some thoughts that have come to mind, or something that you would like to share with. Elise is having a big stretch. Nice stretching, Elise. She's ready to take over. So, Elise, do you want to go first? Please speak. Yes.
It is always a pleasure, a treasure when I hear either one of you speak and when I hear you work together. You raise us up so high in such a profoundly Freirean way that always you are giving the sharpest critique. Sharp. So wrapped and guided by this unreasonable hope and a belief in radical love that is not soft but fierce and encompassing. And the ways in which the two of you embody that and enact it, not just on the page, but in your, as we watched, your faces listening to one another, receiving and giving that love to one another. The many times I have heard you sing, well, Marcelo sings and Claudio listens. Yeah, that's kind of how it happens. And there was one time when you sang him a lullaby in Portuguese, and the tenderness of that sound seems to me a metaphor for what you are calling us toward. A love that has courage, that has passion, that puts its body on that line, and that it is a project without guarantees, but we do it anyway. In this particular time, in this country that we are in the US, it is the message we need every day. I got up, of course, this morning with the question, what country has my president bombed today? And what am I going to do about it? And I come here and I hear what we can do about it. So for that motivating message of love and hope, thank you so much. What a way to cap this extraordinary conference. Thank you both.
In true Freirean style, we have to say that we have learned much of this from you. It is the truth. So it's a great honor to hear that from you.
Professor Pinot was the first in the American academia who brought performance studies tradition, the criticality with the work of Paulo Freire done in Brazil. That was Elise Pinot. She was the first who brought those things together. Foundational paper, and plus the work we all see on her classrooms, on her past students who become professors. I mean, yes, Elise, you taught us. Thank you. Thank you.
It's true. Are there, just if there's hands raised, please, if I
Oh,
miss
one thing.
Yeah.
I don't sing because I don't want to make Marcelo feel bad. So like he could So I did that for love. I said, okay, I'm not gonna think in here. This little boy is gonna think that he can't do it. So that's why I don't.
Generosity has always been one of his great qualities.
Thank you. They can see you.
Yeah. Hi, Claudio, Marcelo. I've never met you before, and I am simply going to repeat what Elisa said, but in not as articulately. I was just completely caught up by all of those energies and dynamics that you've brought to us today, of love, of hope, your love for each other, the respect that you bring to each other, but also to humanity, and the generosity with which you have a vision of inclusion. So thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that to us today. And yeah, strength to you. And I'm also a huge fan of Paulo Freire and digging in more to that work. And yeah, you've been inspiring to us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Another friend is here that wants to speak with you, has a comment. I think you might recognize this young man making his way up.
I don't think we've met before.
Oh,
Marcelo, hi Claudio.
Hey, friend.
It's a delight to see you. My main purpose of coming up is to pass on greetings from Ken Gale, who's on
Thank
his
you.
train back. So, but in addition, I have a question for you. I've got two actually, but the first is whether I was really struck by how you were talking about one student at a time, one class at a time, that the act of hope and love is demonstrated, is embodied in those specific moments. And I wondered whether any of you might be able to draw from, I don't know, the last week or the last day or the last month, of just to give us here a kind of example of something, an interaction with a student, an interaction with someone in a cafe you went to, that kind of gives us a sense of how that looks in practice for each of you, that kind of work of hope and work of love.
Hey lá,
Or
Claudio.
not.
Começa você.
He's telling me
It's a
to
hard
start.
question. I'm passing to him first, and then he's trying to think.
I suddenly, when you're Jonathan, first of all, it's so lovely to see you and hear your voice. That always makes me so happy. And it's a question that I've been thinking a lot in the last, weeks and months, actually. But also more in relation to the World Cup. So it's a little more abstract of soccer. And I'm sorry for those of you who don't like, football or soccer, but this is more of a sociological comment in which observing the world come together, in this amazing, event that has a lot of problems that we know, and we could list a bunch of them. And if you think about sports, you feel, the issue of masculinity and corruption, and there are a lot of, it's embraced by humanity in its domineering forms as well. But I've been really moved to see, that in the United States, the country that right now, is bombing, invading, and mistreating its own citizens who dissent, and breaking friendships, that we have had since the end of the Second World War. Despite all of that, the stadiums and the people all over the world we can see are erupting, with singing along. That has been, to me, one of the most amazing things that happen spontaneously, that are examples of everyday life. I haven't been teaching since late April. So, but back then, of course, my daily interactions are full of experiences of students, who are foregoing, food and fixed residency. I have students living in their cars to be able to afford education, and lots of Latino students who are very afraid of coming to class, so because of the raids, from ICE, that you all probably know about. So having to create new pedagogies on the go, on every day. I don't know how to teach this yet. I'm working on it, how to make it both fair for students, right, who show up to class and students who don't. So, but the attempt, is ongoing. Of course, having a compass, as a Paulo Freirean compass is really helpful, moving forward. How do we make this as inclusive as possible while we criticize, while we learn, even though we don't know exactly how to do it yet. So sorry, long answer, but.
Right, thank you.
I think I really, I miss you, Jonathan. I miss you. I miss all of you. And I've been chairing my department for the past 3 years. In the past 2 weeks or so, I had to take a family leave, so my emails are being unresponded, and everything's fine. But I need this. But what it did to me, this three, and I have an extra year to be chair. What it did to me that I think frame a different part of, can help me to give a different part of this question. Is like, I remember from traditional, especially Black professors in performance studies, like from Omi Ozumu to our dear Bryant Kit Alexander, that we need good administrators, right? And then become administrators under Trump. On my department, it's extremely international faculty, and our grad students, two-thirds of our grad students are internationals, and some of them, they don't have a place to go back to, or it's not safe to go back to. So I felt that some part of my hope was difficult to keep because I wasn't in this classroom as much. That's where those encounters happen often. And also, I haven't been writing. I haven't writing, and that is also how I deal with this world we are at. But as an administrator, what I think was those moments, those concrete moments, is like, I don't know how many times I talked to my chancellor, to my provost, saying, what you are doing to us is what you're complaining that federal government is doing to us. Like every time you try to make cuts because your Excel shit says that that's how you save money because the grants are not coming. There is a life under that number. Is a staff, is a grad student. And so creating those narratives in those administrative meetings where we need to see the person on the other side. Because you are not firing for professors, you are firing staff members, you are firing janitors. You are cutting grad students funding because your timeline for end of degree is not a timeline that has to do with personal lives. I said, you ask us to recruit diversity to your campus. They come with problems, life problems like financial instability, all this shit. So how you deal or not with this shit? And the past weeks specifically, I had 8 of my grad students that I didn't have money for next year. 8, and I think that was the Freirean thing. I met with them. I put my face there. I mean, the buck is stop on me. I'm the chair of this department. I said, I can't promise you, but I'm here, you. And I also felt that for quite some, to have somebody who has an accent, who comes from elsewhere, when they say, this is fucked up, I say, I know. And they know I know it. And then to navigate those details. And those times I was really thinking about Bryant. Like, I need to make sure that I can do whatever I have to make sure they got founded, at least with half. Because here's, if you don't are founded, it's not just money, right? You don't have health insurance, right?
Yeah.
I had grad students that their biggest mistake was producing human lives, giving birth. So I think those things give us, at least gave me a different sense of this is not empty scholarship. You know, this is something we can bring to our meetings, to our classrooms, to our coffee shops, you know, to there's a life at the end of the number. You know, there is a student in our classroom, you know, there is somebody, and live with the heartbreakings, like two of the best undergraduate students I ever had. They never graduated.
Thank you
Couldn't,
both.
yeah.
Thank you both. That's a wonderful response. Thank you so much. I know there's somebody waiting to ask you another question.
Thank you for that response. I think we've time for one more question. Jen, do you want to?
So, hi Marcelo and Claudio.
Hello.
I'm midway through my PhD, and I listened with interest about your comments on a performance autoethnographer kind of parodying the accents of people from different parts of the world, and how you felt about that. My question is, so when I've been learning qualitative research, I've been told that when I'm interviewing participants, that any transcripts you should be as complete as possible and not paraphrased. You should use participants' own language, and include the pauses and the ums and the ahs and all that kind of thing to reproduce their experience. So if you're in a situation where you're a researcher who's working with participants from other parts of the world whose language patterns and the words they use are different, and you've reproduced that, how then would that researcher present that in a performative way, in a way that isn't parodying them but remains true to their participants' kind of experience and testimony? Does that make sense? You know, you've got to use the words, but how do you use the words in a way which is respectful and doesn't kind of form a pastiche? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Yeah, that's my question. Thank you. Because
It's a great
difficult
question.
in written language. It's very different from spoken presentations, but actually you may be coming from the same source material. So how would you approach that problem where there's inherently different needs? Okay, so I'm just tired.
No, you're great. That's a difficult issue to deal with. So I appreciate you elaborating and re-elaborating it. For example, we struggled, Claudia and I, with this in our in our books together, in our publications, and the struggle is with copy editors. We have had to have publishers who can then intervene and back us up, and it's a complicated issue. And as you've said at the end, it depends really on the medium. On the page is different than it is in a verbal presentation. So I think that's very specific to the medium you're using. If you're interested in this because your research, is in the area, in the few minutes we have here, I don't have time to give you enough, point you enough directions, but I can offline. Kitrina can give you my email, and I do have quite a bit of resources that might help you. Won't solve your issue, but might help you in some guided directions. Ultimately, the key is to actually really ask the people you are, working with, to see how they want to be represented. I've worked with people who, wanted to, didn't want their mistakes, grammatical mistakes, for being, a second language user, to appear on the page, but wanted their voices to appear on the page. So, I've crafted it, depending on my partnership, with the people that I'm writing about. Same thing with Claudio and I. We have different levels, and different ways of speaking and writing, English. So we are always talking about, how to, represent each other. So it's always a negotiation in that dialogical way, with respect. So, but again, if you want more theoretical, information on this, I know that social linguistics has been dealing with this for, many, many decades, and I have, some ideas for you. It sounds like you're using more of a, conversational analysis approach. So let me know, reach out, and I'll engage with you via email.
One quick thing. Do you have time for a quick comment?
Yeah, yes, and we'll finish after this comment.
Okay, one of my ideas when teaching my grad seminars, I tell what happens was my own trajectory. I think those questions go to how research is done, from paradigms to knowledge, to how we deal with the crisis of representation. And I always tell my students too that I made a conscious theoretical decision to write through ethnography, autoethnography. Like I made this conscious decision. I'm not saying the others are wrong or bad. That's how I could sleep with as a researcher, right? So I write my own interactions with the others. That body here writing it. I think it is a possibility is to rethink, like, because there is always the interpretation of the others' lives. But as Marcelo said, there are many ways to do that. And I think we try to do with care. But I made a decision that I wouldn't do pre this kind of scholarship because it wasn't for me. It's not what I was dealing with. But I think too that those things always lay on those paradigms, on those theoretical and methodological constructions, and how we believe research should be done or not. Just to finish, one of my graduate students said to me like, "Oh, Claudio hates when we record our interview or translate the notes." I said, "I don't hate that process. What I question is that this is the legitimization of the other lives on the academic setting." Am I making any sense here? It's like when those are researched to legitimize, to make, oh, I did what I need to do. When the power imbalance is always different. Somebody's writing, editing, and getting the name. So I think that's also another part of this. And I think it becomes like how advancing our career or how what we believe scholarship is or it should not be or is. That's how we make those decisions. Mm, the, our roles as public intellectuals.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to draw our time with you.
No, you gotta go to the pub and have pints. Priorities.
And sing
My
some
heart is
songs.
broken that I cannot go. And the main reason I'm not there with you, I had the research funds, is like I don't feel comfortable to live in the country. I'm not American citizen. I don't think I'm famous enough, but our old work has the name of that person since 2016, and I couldn't risk of not coming back. So that's the main reason. And I'm on the process of trying to get the citizenship. But that's the main reason I make the hard decision of not being there in person with you all.
Claudio and Marcelo, we have a space for you whenever you pitch up. And your families are very welcome to visit with us. We've got the space and the place in Cornwall for you to come and spend some time by the beach. And we've even put a heat wave on for you because we know you like hot weather. But I hate to leave you, but it's really lovely spending some time in your presence and seeing you on our screen. And thank you so much for your keynote. Do you want to just give an applause?
Thank you for the invitation and have fun this evening with each other, connecting.
Yes.